You are lying awake again, staring into the darkness long after everyone else has gone to sleep, and for a moment a thought enters your mind that you immediately try to push away. It is not a new thought. It has visited you before in quiet moments, during funerals, during hospital visits, during nights when life felt heavier than usual. The thought is simple, but it carries an uncomfortable weight. What if the promise that everything will be made right someday is the very thing that keeps you from confronting how uncertain everything actually is? You do not want to think about it because uncertainty feels cold, it feels lonely. It feels like standing at the edge of a cliff without a railing. Yet the question remains. Throughout human history, countless people have lived difficult lives while holding on to the hope of a perfect existence, waiting beyond death. The idea is powerful because it speaks directly to some of the deepest wounds human beings carry. We suffer. We lose people we love. We experience injustice. We watch good people struggle and cruel people prosper. We carry regrets, fears, disappointments, and grief. Faced with these realities, the promise of a place where every pain is healed, every tear is wiped away, every injustice corrected, and every loss restored feels almost irresistible. The question is not whether this hope is meaningful. The question is why it feels so necessary. Imagine a person who has spent decades working exhausting jobs, sacrificing dreams, enduring hardships, and watching opportunities disappear. Imagine someone who buried a parent too early, lost a child, survived betrayal, or spent years feeling invisible. For such a person, the promise of ultimate restoration is not merely a theological concept. It becomes emotional oxygen. It becomes a framework that helps suffering feel survivable. Yet this creates a tension that is rarely discussed openly. When a promise becomes emotionally necessary, our ability to examine it objectively can become complicated. Human beings are not purely rational creatures. We are emotional creatures who often reason in service of our emotional needs. We want security. We want meaning. We want reassurance that our pain matters. We want to believe that the universe is ultimately fair. Perhaps one of the most uncomfortable possibilities is that the human longing for heaven may reveal something profound, not only about what exists beyond us, but also about what exists within us. Consider how often people seek certainty, not just about death, but about relationships, careers, health, and the future. We crave guarantees in a world that offers very few. We want to know that our efforts will pay off. We want to know that our loved ones will remain with us. We want to know that tomorrow will resemble today. Yet reality repeatedly refuses to provide those assurances. Illness arrives unexpectedly. Relationships end. Accidents happen. Entire lives can change in a single afternoon. Against this backdrop, the promise of an eternal destination where everything is secure forever carries extraordinary psychological power. It offers certainty where life offers ambiguity. It offers permanence where life offers impermanence. It offers answers where life often provides questions. But there is another layer that makes this subject deeply personal. Most people do not merely fear death itself, they fear what death represents. Death reminds us that we are limited. It reminds us that our time is finite. It reminds us that every choice excludes countless other possibilities. It reminds us that one day, every achievement, every argument, every possession, every status symbol, and every carefully constructed identity will no longer belong to us. That realization can be difficult to face. Some philosophers have argued that much of human behavior is shaped by attempts to manage this awareness. We distract ourselves. We pursue accomplishments. We seek legacy. We build stories that help us make sense of our existence. The promise of heaven, viewed through this lens, can be seen as one of humanity's most powerful responses to mortality. Not necessarily because it is true or false, but because it speaks directly to our deepest existential anxieties. Think about how children react when they first begin to understand death. There is often confusion, fear, disbelief. The mind struggles to grasp the idea of permanent absence. Many adults are not fundamentally different. The vocabulary becomes more sophisticated. But the emotional challenge remains. We struggle to imagine a world without ourselves. We struggle to imagine ourselves without consciousness. We struggle to imagine that the story we experience so vividly every day could simply end. The promise of continuation answers a psychological need that may be nearly universal. Yet there is a paradox hiding here. The more desperately we need something to be true, the more difficult it can become to evaluate it with complete honesty. This does not mean the belief is wrong. It simply means human beings are vulnerable to emotional investment. We all are. We often notice evidence that supports what we hope is true and overlook evidence that challenges it. We interpret ambiguity through the lens of our desires. We construct narratives that help us feel secure. This tendency appears in politics, relationships, business decisions, personal identity, and countless other areas of life. Why would questions about eternity be immune from the same psychological forces? Imagine standing in a crowded room where everyone around you believes the same promise. They speak about it with confidence, they find comfort in it. Their families found comfort in it, their communities are built around it, their rituals reinforce it, their emotional lives are connected to it. Under such conditions, questioning can feel frightening, not merely intellectually but socially and emotionally. Human beings are tribal creatures. We want belonging. We fear isolation. Sometimes the cost of doubt feels higher than the cost of certainty. Sometimes asking difficult questions can feel like risking part of your identity. Yet beneath all these layers lies a deeper issue that many people encounter at some point in their lives. They begin to wonder whether their longing for heaven reveals more about the architecture of the human heart than about the architecture of the universe. They notice that every culture throughout history has generated stories about what comes after death. Different civilizations have imagined different destinations, different judgments, different forms of continuation, different visions of paradise. The details vary dramatically, but the pattern remains remarkably persistent. Human beings repeatedly create narratives that reach beyond the grave. Why? Is it because these narratives point toward a deeper reality? Is it because they emerge from universal psychological needs? Is it some combination of both? Nobody possesses complete certainty. That uncertainty can be unsettling, because many of us were taught that confidence and conviction are virtues, while uncertainty is weakness. Yet uncertainty is also the natural companion of honesty. There are questions so large that humility may be the most reasonable response. The challenge is that humility rarely feels emotionally satisfying. Certainty feels better. Certainty feels stronger. Certainty feels safer. Yet life repeatedly demonstrates that feeling certain and being correct are not the same thing. History is filled with confident people who turned out to be mistaken. Every generation inherits assumptions that later generations reconsider. Every era contains ideas that seem obvious until they no longer do. This does not prove anything about heaven. It simply reminds us of the limits of human confidence. And perhaps that is where the discomfort begins. Because if heaven represents the ultimate promise, then questioning it feels like questioning the ultimate source of reassurance. It feels like removing the final safety net beneath our fears. Most people can tolerate uncertainty about next year. Many struggle to tolerate uncertainty about eternity. The emotional stakes are simply too high. Yet there may be something profoundly human about sitting with that discomfort instead of immediately escaping it. There may be value in acknowledging that our desire for certainty sometimes exceeds our access to knowledge. There may be wisdom in recognizing that hope and evidence are not identical things, even when they overlap. The human search for meaning is complex. We are creatures capable of extraordinary imagination, profound love, devastating grief, and relentless curiosity. We build civilizations, write poetry, create religions, develop philosophies, and tell stories because we are constantly trying to understand what it means to exist. The promise of heaven occupies a unique place within that search because it addresses the one mystery every person eventually confronts. What happens when the story ends? Or does it end at all? The uncomfortable truth is that nobody living possesses complete first-hand certainty. People possess convictions, experiences, interpretations, arguments, traditions, and beliefs. But complete certainty remains elusive. For some, that realization strengthens faith. For others, it deepens questions. For many, it does both simultaneously. And perhaps That is why the idea remains so powerful. Not because it eliminates mystery, but because it exists at the intersection of everything that makes us human: fear, hope, love, loss, meaning, imagination, longing, and the refusal to believe that the people we cherish can simply disappear forever. Whether heaven represents a future reality, a symbolic expression of human hope, or something beyond either category, one fact remains impossible to ignore. The promise speaks directly to the deepest parts of us, and whenever a promise becomes that emotionally significant, understanding why we need it may be just as important as understanding whether it is true. Picture yourself at a funeral. The room is quiet except for occasional whispers and the sound of people trying not to cry. Flowers surround a photograph of someone who was alive only days ago. Their clothes still hang in a closet somewhere. Their phone may still contain unread messages. Their favorite chair remains exactly where they left it. Everything physical suggests they were here. Everything emotional insists they should still be here. Yet they are gone. In moments like this, abstract philosophical questions stop feeling abstract. They become intensely personal. Nobody standing beside a coffin is conducting a detached intellectual exercise. They are confronting loss, and loss has a way of exposing the deepest needs of the human heart. This is where the promise of heaven often reveals its greatest emotional power. It does not merely answer curiosity about the future. It addresses the pain of separation. It offers the possibility that goodbye is not truly goodbye. It suggests that the relationships which gave life meaning are not permanently erased. And perhaps that is why the idea carries such extraordinary influence across cultures and generations. Human beings are attachment-driven creatures. From the moment we are born, our survival depends on connection. We seek comfort, protection, understanding, and belonging. Throughout life we form bonds that become woven into our identity. Parents shape us, friends influence us, partners transform us, children change us. The people we love become part of how we understand ourselves. When one of those people disappears, it can feel as though a piece of reality itself has been removed. The grief is not only about missing them, it is about losing part of the structure through which life made sense. In that context, the promise of reunion becomes almost unimaginably comforting. Yet there is an uncomfortable question hiding beneath that comfort. What if our deepest desires influence our deepest convictions more than we realize? Human psychology contains a remarkable capacity for self-protection. We often construct interpretations that help us endure experiences that might otherwise overwhelm us. Consider how people react to setbacks. One person sees failure as proof of inadequacy. Another sees the same failure as preparation for future success. The external event may be identical, yet the interpretation differs dramatically because interpretation serves emotional needs. This tendency is not inherently dishonest. In many cases, it is adaptive. It helps people survive hardship. It helps them maintain hope. It helps them continue moving forward when circumstances become painful. The question is whether similar dynamics can influence our beliefs about ultimate realities. When people encounter unbearable loss, is the promise of heaven attractive because it reflects an objective truth, because it fulfills a profound psychological need, or because it somehow does both? The honest answer is that nobody can completely separate those possibilities. That uncertainty creates tension because most people prefer clean answers. We prefer categories. We prefer certainty. We prefer conclusions that remove ambiguity. Yet, existence rarely operates that way. The more closely we examine human experience, the more complexity emerges. Think about how often people imagine future happiness. A student believes fulfillment will arrive after graduation. An employee believes fulfillment will arrive after promotion. A person struggling financially believes fulfillment will arrive after achieving stability. Someone who feels lonely believes fulfillment will arrive after finding love. Human beings are constantly projecting satisfaction into the future. We tell ourselves that peace exists just beyond the next achievement, the next milestone, the next breakthrough. Sometimes those goals genuinely improve life, yet many people eventually discover something surprising. The promised feeling does not fully arrive, or it arrives briefly and then fades. The horizon simply moves farther away. New desires replace old desires. New anxieties replace old anxieties. New goals emerge. Some psychologists have suggested that human beings possess an extraordinary ability to adapt, even to positive circumstances. What once felt like a dream eventually becomes normal. What once felt extraordinary eventually becomes expected. This tendency raises an intriguing philosophical question. Is the promise of heaven partly appealing because it represents the final version of this pattern? The ultimate future state where all dissatisfaction ends forever. The ultimate destination beyond which no further longing remains. There is something fascinating about how often human imagination gravitates toward permanence. We want permanent love, permanent happiness, permanent justice, permanent security. Yet nearly everything we encounter in life is temporary. Relationships change, circumstances change, bodies age, societies evolve, even mountains eventually erode. Impermanence appears woven into the fabric of existence. Against that backdrop, heaven represents a radically different vision. It offers permanence in a world defined by change. It offers certainty in a world defined by unpredictability. It offers completion in a world defined by incompleteness. Whether one interprets that promise literally, symbolically, spiritually, or philosophically, its psychological significance is undeniable. It addresses tensions that many people feel every day, even when they are not consciously thinking about death. Because the desire for heaven is often connected to something larger than fear of mortality. It is connected to dissatisfaction with the world as it is. Look around honestly. There is beauty everywhere, but there is also suffering everywhere. There is kindness, but there is cruelty. There is love, but there is violence. There is generosity, but there is exploitation. People frequently encounter realities that seem profoundly unfair. Children suffer. Innocent people are harmed. Dreams collapse. Entire lives can be altered by circumstances beyond individual control. Faced with such realities, many people experience a deep longing for moral resolution. They want the story to make sense. They want justice to prevail. They want goodness to matter. The promise of heaven often functions not only as personal comfort, but as cosmic reassurance. It suggests that apparent chaos may conceal a larger order. Yet even here another tension emerges. Human beings possess an extraordinary ability to endure difficult realities when they believe those realities serve a meaningful purpose. If suffering is random, it can feel unbearable. If suffering contributes to a larger story, people often find strength they never knew they possessed. This pattern appears throughout psychology. Meaning changes experience. Two individuals can endure similar hardships while interpreting them in entirely different ways. One feels destroyed, the other feels transformed. The difference often lies not in the event itself, but in the story attached to the event. This observation does not tell us whether any particular story is true. It simply highlights how deeply human beings depend on meaning. Perhaps that is why existential questions remain so emotionally charged. They are not merely intellectual puzzles. They shape how people experience every aspect of life. If you believe existence ultimately leads somewhere meaningful, suffering may appear different. If you believe existence ends in silence, suffering may appear different. If you remain uncertain, suffering may appear different still. Our interpretations influence our emotional reality in powerful ways. Yet there is another layer that many people avoid discussing openly. Sometimes the promise of heaven can become a way of postponing confrontation with the present moment. Not always, and not for everyone, but sometimes. Human beings often escape into future possibilities because the present feels difficult. We fantasize about future success instead of addressing current dissatisfaction. We imagine future relationships instead of examining present loneliness. We focus on future outcomes instead of engaging fully with present experience. It is possible that any vision of a perfect future can occasionally function as psychological escape. Again, this does not invalidate the vision. It simply reflects a recurring human tendency. The challenge is learning to distinguish hope from avoidance. Genuine hope can inspire courage. Avoidance can prevent growth. Genuine hope can deepen engagement with life. Avoidance can encourage withdrawal from life. The difference is subtle, but important. Consider how many people postpone living because they are waiting for something, waiting for certainty, waiting for approval, waiting for success, waiting for happiness, waiting for the right circumstances. Entire decades can disappear while people wait for life to begin. One of the most unsettling realizations many adults experience is that life was happening the entire time. The future they imagined never arrived in exactly the form they expected. The present moment was always the only place existence actually occurred. This realization introduces a provocative question. If someone became completely convinced of a perfect future existence, would that conviction deepen their appreciation for the present or diminish it? Different people answer differently. Some become more compassionate, more courageous, and more purposeful. Others become preoccupied with the future at the expense of the present. Human psychology allows for both possibilities. And perhaps that complexity is what makes the subject so enduring. Heaven is not merely a destination in many people's minds. It is a mirror reflecting human hopes, fears, desires, insecurities, griefs, and aspirations. It reveals what we long for most intensely. It reveals what we fear losing most deeply. It reveals our struggle to reconcile the beauty of existence with its fragility. Most importantly, it forces us to confront a question that never completely disappears. Are we drawn to the promise because it reveals something about ultimate reality, or because it reveals something about ourselves? Perhaps the most honest response is that the two possibilities are not always easy to separate. The longing itself is real. The grief is real, the fear is real, the hope is real, the questions are real. And regardless of where one ultimately lands, those realities tell us something profound about the human condition. We are creatures who know we will die, yet continue searching for permanence. We know life is uncertain, yet continue searching for certainty. We know suffering exists, yet continue searching for meaning. And somewhere within that search, the promise of heaven continues to exert a powerful pull on the human imagination, not merely because of what it claims about the future, but because of what it reveals about the deepest longings of the present. You are sitting alone after everyone else has gone home, and for once there is nothing to distract you. No notifications, no conversations, no background noise, just silence. The kind of silence that feels uncomfortable because it leaves you alone with your own thoughts. And somewhere beneath all the routines, responsibilities, and distractions that normally occupy your attention, a realization begins to surface. One day, every person you know will disappear from your life, or you will disappear from theirs. Every argument that feels important today will eventually be forgotten. Every possession you worked so hard to acquire will belong to someone else or cease to exist entirely. Every role you identify with will end. The version of yourself you defend, protect, promote, and worry about so constantly is temporary. Most people spend enormous amounts of energy avoiding this realization, not because they are irrational, but because confronting impermanence directly can feel overwhelming. Yet perhaps this is precisely where the deeper significance of the promise of heaven begins to emerge. Not necessarily as a statement that can be proven or disproven with complete certainty, but as a response to one of the most fundamental tensions of human existence. We are beings capable of imagining eternity while living inside limitation. We can conceive of forever, yet our lives are measured in decades. We can imagine perfection, yet we live amid flaws. We can long for permanence, yet everything around us changes. This tension creates a kind of existential friction that many people feel throughout their lives without always recognizing it. It appears in the dissatisfaction that follows achievement. It appears in the sadness that accompanies aging. It appears in the fear of losing people we love. It appears in the strange sense that even our happiest moments contain a trace of melancholy because we know they cannot last forever. Think about the most beautiful experience you have ever had. Perhaps it was a relationship, a conversation, a moment with family, a personal triumph, a sunset viewed from exactly the right place at exactly the right time. For a brief moment, everything felt complete. Then it ended. The memory remained, but the moment itself vanished. Human beings experience this pattern repeatedly. We encounter beauty, connection, joy, meaning, and wonder, yet we can never fully hold on to them. They arrive, they transform us, they leave. In many ways, life consists of learning how to love things that cannot stay. That lesson is both beautiful and painful. It teaches gratitude, but it also exposes vulnerability. Perhaps this is why the promise of heaven resonates so deeply. It imagines a reality where the things we cherish most are no longer threatened by time, a reality where love cannot be interrupted by death, a reality where beauty does not fade, a reality where fulfillment does not dissolve. Whether one interprets that vision literally, symbolically, or somewhere in between, its emotional appeal is undeniable because it addresses wounds that nearly every person carries. Yet there is another possibility worth considering. What if the longing itself matters regardless of where it comes from? Human history is filled with desires that revealed something important. Hunger reveals the need for nourishment. Loneliness reveals the need for connection. Curiosity reveals the desire for understanding. The longing for transcendence may reveal something as well. But what exactly? Different people reach different conclusions. Some see the longing as evidence that human beings are oriented toward a reality beyond the material world. Others see it as a product of consciousness confronting mortality. Others see a combination of psychological, cultural, spiritual, and existential influences. What remains fascinating is that the longing persists across centuries, across civilizations, across radically different worldviews. Human beings continue asking the same questions. What happens after death? Does suffering have ultimate meaning? Is there a deeper purpose behind existence? Why do we desire permanence in a temporary world? Why does the human mind reach beyond what it can directly observe? These questions survive because they are connected to experiences that survive. Grief survives, love survives, wonder survives, fear survives, hope survives. And as long as those experiences remain part of the human condition, the search for answers will remain part of the human condition as well. Perhaps the most uncomfortable truth is not that heaven might be real or unreal. Perhaps the most uncomfortable truth is that certainty itself may be less available than we wish. Many people spend their lives searching for a final conclusion that will eliminate all doubt. Yet doubt seems woven into existence. Even people with profound faith often experience moments of uncertainty. Even skeptics experience moments of wonder. Even the most confident individuals encounter questions they cannot fully resolve. The human experience appears less like a destination of certainty and more like an ongoing encounter with mystery. That realization can feel disappointing at first because many of us crave definitive answers. Yet it can also be liberating. If complete certainty is unavailable, then perhaps the goal is not to eliminate questions but to engage them honestly. Perhaps wisdom is not found in pretending to know everything. Perhaps wisdom is found in recognizing the limits of knowledge while remaining open to possibility. There is a peculiar kind of courage required for that posture. It is easier to cling blindly to certainty. It is easier to dismiss complexity. It is easier to reduce reality to simple categories. Living with unanswered questions requires patience. It requires humility. It requires the willingness to acknowledge that some mysteries may exceed our current understanding. And perhaps that humility is especially important when discussing subjects as profound as heaven, death, meaning, and existence itself. Because behind every philosophical argument stands a human being. Behind every belief stands a personal story. Behind every conviction stands a lifetime of experiences, relationships, fears, hopes, losses, and aspirations. People do not arrive at their deepest beliefs through logic alone. They arrive through life, through suffering, through love, through community, through reflection, through experiences that shape how they interpret reality. Recognizing this does not require agreement. It requires empathy. The person who believes passionately and the person who questions passionately are often responding to the same underlying realities. Both are confronting mortality. Both are searching for meaning. Both are trying to understand what it means to exist in a universe that is simultaneously beautiful and bewildering. The details differ, but the human struggle remains remarkably similar. And perhaps that is where the title itself becomes most interesting. Heaven is the biggest impossible promise ever sold. What makes a promise feel impossible? Is it the magnitude of what it offers? Is it the inability to verify it completely? Is it the fact that it addresses desires so enormous that nothing in ordinary experience seems capable of satisfying them? The phrase invites reflection because it highlights the gap between human longing and human knowledge. We long for things that exceed our certainty. We hope for things we cannot fully prove. We fear things we cannot fully understand. We live in the tension between what we know and what we wish we knew. Yet maybe that tension is not a flaw. Maybe it is part of what makes us human. A creature with complete certainty might stop searching. A creature with no hope might stop caring. Human beings occupy a strange middle ground. We question. We hope. We doubt. We believe. We wonder. We fear. We imagine. We continue searching even when answers remain incomplete. And perhaps the enduring power of heaven lies not merely in what it promises about the future, but in what it reveals about us right now. It reveals that human beings are meaning-seeking creatures. It reveals that we resist reducing life to mere survival. It reveals that we hunger for justice, connection, beauty, purpose, and permanence. It reveals that we struggle to accept that everything we love might be temporary. It reveals that we are capable of imagining realities greater than the one immediately before us. Whether that imagination points beyond itself or simply reflects the depth of human consciousness remains one of the great unanswered questions. But perhaps the most important realization is this: regardless of what awaits beyond death, the fact that we ask these questions at all tells us something extraordinary. We are creatures aware of our own finitude, yet unwilling to stop searching for transcendence. We are temporary beings fascinated by eternity. We are fragile beings searching for permanence. We are uncertain beings searching for meaning. And in that search, somewhere between fear and hope, doubt and faith, knowledge and mystery, the promise of heaven continues to endure, not merely as an idea about what may come next, but as a reflection of the deepest questions human beings have ever asked about themselves.